Hello, everyone. I hope not many of you are feeling too hungover today. I can see some smiles, most likely some. My name is Spiros Malandrakis. I am the head of alcoholic drinks research at Euromonitor International. So I've been covering the alcohol industry for the last about 18 years, from beer to spirits, to all the subsegments within that, to RTDs, and of course to the rising non and low alcoholic drink trend that we will be talking about today. I decided to keep it a bit basic, so just 5 slides talking about qualitative trends. I'm not going to give you too many charts because of the hour and the hangover. But if you have any questions or anything specific that you would like to know, I would be very, very happy, obviously, to have a conversation afterwards. Let me grab my stick. So, my job, and I've described it in the past when people ask me what do I do, is quite interesting in the sense I have to predict the future of drinking, but ultimately it's predicting the future. So every year I have to distill all the information that Euromonitor gets from around the planet, from 100 different markets, into some actionable big picture trends, mega trends if you wish, the directions of travel for the alcohol industry. And we're going to be talking about 5 of them today. The first one being what we have already seen, all about the resilience of the industry in the face of what I call a state of perma-crisis, and I'm sure everyone in this room is very familiar with what I mean by that. We've been going through the catastrophic, once-in-a-century events of the COVID pandemic, to the revival after that, which I used to call the new roaring 20s, or revenge conviviality, as you can call it many different ways. It's this kind of need for consumers to go back out. That was followed by the massive inflationary pressures that were already discussed. And now wars everywhere, potentially further inflationary pressures. And that is a state of perma-crisis. But I think we have to remember that the industry, in the face of all that, is actually doing particularly well. And I think this story of resilience is very interesting in itself. And gives us an idea about the future as well. The second one is the space beyond beer, beyond spirits, beyond wine. It's basically RTDs, and we're going to talk much more about RTDs in a bit. And I think they're extremely interesting and exciting as a category right now. Already there was a conversation about premiumization, and I think it is a very important trend. We need to just put it in the context of what is happening around the world, what are its limits, and what could be the potential counter forces derailing it for a little bit, because in the long term, I also believe, what was just discussed, that premiumization will continue being here to stay. Next one is non-alcoholic, low alcoholic drinks. I call it next-gen euphorics. And it's important for me to not just discuss the negative, basically, that we're taking alcohol out of the equation, but how can we add value to this segment to make it more pioneering, more innovative, and actually adding some additional functionality to these propositions. And we're going to have examples of that. And then finally, the importance of e-commerce that historically in the industry has been really not something that we have focused on. And I think we will be seeing much more of it in the next couple of years, as consumers now are very used to just having everything at the click of a button following the years we spent stuck in our basements during COVID. So the first one, the resilience, recovery, realignment. So as I said, the industry has proven to be extremely resilient. Largely when we're looking at the total global volumes of alcoholic drinks, they are mostly where they were before the end of the world. So they are largely where they were in 2019. Now, that's the total number. The interesting bit starts when we start digging deeper into the data, and we see that while the total volumes are actually very close, we break it down by off and on trade. It is the off trade that has made massive leaps forward, and the on trade, the bars, the restaurants, the clubs, are the ones that are still missing massive amount of volumes compared to where they used to be back in 2019. And I think for me, that highlights a long-term issue, and that is basically the idea that beyond what happened with COVID and the pandemic issues, it is a long-term transition away from home, away from the clubs, and into our home consumption. There's a number of reasons for that. It's economical, macroeconomical, home as a central entertainment hub. That wasn't the case back in the 90s or the 2000s. Even when I was discussing it a couple of years ago with the head of the Brewers Association in the US, they told me that the biggest competition beer had was not spirits, was not cannabis that was rising at the moment, was not RTDs, was actually dating apps. And I think that transition into a new way of socialization is what will inform the future 5 to 10 years. And I think off-trade will continue becoming more and more important in the face of the on-trade slowly diminishing. And of course, all brands have to take that into consideration as they plan their future. I mentioned the space beyond is an extremely interesting category. When I try to describe it to people, RTDs, for some of us of a certain age here, we probably witnessed them back in the 90s as very colorful bottles for certain high energy occasions late at night, not necessarily with natural ingredients, but they were doing the job. And in many cases, they were the stepping stone for many of us to then graduate into proper spirits or proper drinks or proper cocktails. And they always change. That's the nature of the beast. The best way to describe them is that RTDs are basically the David Bowie of alcoholic drinks. There is no one way to describe them. They always change the way they are perceived and the way they promote and describe themselves. And in this case, in the last 1 or 2 years, we've seen a number of new launches, many of them in this hall just next to us as well, that are more about a premium positioning, more about real spirit base versus the malt-based RTDs that made inroads in the US the last couple of years. I don't know, most of you must be familiar with the massive trend of hard seltzers that didn't end up so well in the last year. Obviously, whatever goes so high tends to fall equally fast. But as hard seltzers are coming out of the picture, we have these new generations of RTDs, mostly spirit-based, primarily replicating the on-trade experience of a cocktail. Basically, it's just spirits with something else. And I think they have a long way to go forward, both because of efficiency, but also because of convenience, but also because of many of them now are positioned much more premium than RTDs used to be back in the 90s when we were all dancing with one in our hands. Premiumization was mentioned before, and I think premiumization, because I've been covering the industry for 20 years now, is like a mantra, like it seems like has always been there. I still believe in the long-term potential of premiumization as a trend. Consumers will continue moving for more and more aspirational products, more sophisticated consumption, lower volume, higher value, especially in mature markets. That's definitely the case. But at the same time, I have to ring the alarm bell, if you wish, that in the context of the cost of living crisis that we're living right now, we haven't really seen it just yet. At the moment, the data we have is only up to 2022, and 2022 seems to be extremely well. All premium products are doing well. Champagne is doing well. Single malts, all the categories that are inherently associated with premiumization are doing really well. But we start anecdotally hearing the first whispers of a slowdown in the more premium side of things. And of course, it's inevitable. To the extent that people don't have enough money to pay their rent or for essential food staples, they have to start cutting somewhere. And the first place they cut is on-trade, which we already mentioned in the beginning. The second place, inevitably at some point, will have to be the premium side of things. That doesn't mean that the long-term potential of premiumization is derailed. I still believe that in the long term, that's the way to go. But I think in the next 1 or 2 years, as inflation continues being so high, we have to be a little bit careful about a monolithic focus only on premium products. Differentiation, allowing consumers to trade down or trade across if the times are tough, will be a very, very important way to keep them within a certain brand or certain company ecosystem. And this is the trend, next-gen euphorics and alcohol proxies or non-alcoholic drinks, moderation, whatever we call them. When I speak with alcohol companies, most of the time in the last 3 or 4 years, they very rarely want to speak to me about alcoholic drinks. They mostly want to talk about non-alcoholic drinks. And I joke sometimes that I had a very high-ranking senior person in a beer company about a year ago telling me that, Spiros, I don't even know if we're going to be selling any alcohol in 30 years' time. And that obviously is an exaggeration, but it shows how important this trend is and how disruptive it will be in the next 5 to 10 years. What I would like to stress, because everyone talks about no and low alcoholic drinks, I happen to be one of the first people that talked about it. I wrote my first article about non-alcoholic drinks, non-alcoholic spirits back in January 2016. So it's already quite a long time before. The difference now is that we're moving beyond the non-alcohol positioning into added functionality. So it's all about adding ingredients that facilitate energizing occasions, or they are ingredients that facilitate someone going to sleep earlier at night without having to have alcohol. It's all about this added functionality. And I think the next wave of these products will be all about this added functionality, added value, added ingredients. And the last one is how e-commerce that historically accounted for less than 3% of the overall total volumes of sold of alcoholic drinks, which is extremely low compared with all other FMCG industries. Obviously, because of legal reasons, because alcohol has to check the ages of people consuming it, there is additional logistic problems, but also there was an element of complacency. Companies and brands didn't feel like they needed to do that. Consumers were happy to go to the local shop to buy whatever they needed or go to the bar. COVID massively disrupted and changed all that, and I think there is no way to put the genie back in the bottle. Convenience on the one hand for e-commerce, but at the same time, the massive variety of products available, the fact that there will be online storefronts that allow for thousands of brands to be available at the click of a button, that is something that we cannot go away from. And I think many companies are investing in that. I would expect even smaller manufacturers, even craft producers, to start being active on that front, because this is the future, especially if we combine it with what I said earlier in the first trend about this transition towards off-trade consumption. People will be staying more at home, and they will expect everything at the push of the button at the same time that sit on their couch and going through their dating apps or whatever they are doing. So that is more or less everything very briefly about the key trends. Hope you found it interesting. Any other questions we can talk about in a bit.